Hello, my name is Ainsley Morgan, and welcome to the Stranger Things podcast, the best paranormal activity podcast. Today's podcast is going to be about the mysterious island of the dolls. This infamous island, populated with dolls, is situated in the borough of Xochimilco in Mexico City and has a very interesting story behind it. One of our guests will explain more about the history of the island and will tell us a story about his experience at this famous island. As that a lot of people will be skeptical of the story, our second guest is going to be a paranormal expert to help prove or debunk the mysterious story of the island of the dolls. Today's podcast is sponsored by Squarespace.com, the perfect place to create your own domain. More about our sponsor later. Now, I'd like to welcome our first guest, here to tell us his story about the island of the dolls and his visit. Please welcome Jeff Matthews.
Alright, thank you Ainsley for welcoming me here. So it's best if I start by setting the scene. There's four of us, so me, my three friends, plus our boatman. And it's a bright and colorful colored Tangerina that we're driving on. So it's like a gondola, but for the South American countries. So we're going to the historic canals of Mexico City's Xochimilco district. So it's a Monday, and if we had come one day earlier, it would have been packed with loads of Mexican families drinking cervezas and picnicking on a veritable flotilla. So they're just catching up and enjoying others' companies to the sound of traditional musicians drifting slowly by. So they're on their own boats and they're just playing music as they please. So today it's nearly empty, so there's only a few local families on vacation, a few travelers like ourselves, but the mood is fairly calm and we float by offering smiles and waving to the people, so most of which are returned enthusiastically, sorry.
So, why did you go to Xochimilco and when did you go there?
We came to Xochimilco last year with the mission to visit the incredibly strange island of the dolls, and what went to a 7-hour total journey is really just beginning. At this point, it's worth pointing out that the canals of Xochimilco are a World Heritage Site, and what became abundantly clear to us shortly after arriving is that many in this town seem to be well aware of the income potential that comes from such a label.
And how did the people react about your arrival over there?
As soon as we left the train station, helpful strangers began pointing us in the direction of the Embarcadero, about 10 minutes walk away. At first we were impressed that Mexicans are, in our experience, extremely helpful and welcoming to visitors, and we assumed we were on the receiving end of some warm hospitality, and then it just got ridiculous. In the 10-minute walk, no fewer than 10 men gave us unsolicited directions to the Embarcadero, and as it went on, the seeds of suspicion began sprouting in our minds.
So, how were you able to get a boat ride and how much did they cost to go for a tour?
As it turns out, we were being directed to the significantly more expensive Embarcadero, what should have been a 1400 pesos for a 4-hour trip was being sold to us for 2500 dollars pesos, sorry. Add to that, he was offering bottles of water at a 1233% increase compared to the shop prices here in the city. And if that wasn't enough, he was setting up what I can only assume is a practice scam. He told us the boat lift, which is necessary to get to the island of the dolls, was not working the day prior, warning we may have to give up about an hour into the journey, forfeiting a significant amount of our agreed upon price. Having researched the price a bit before going, and with the man refusing to budge, we made the decision to give up, walk back to the train station, and head back to Mexico City with our pride intact.
Well, How did you end up on the island?
Retracting our steps, we glanced down the main road as we set off back to the train station, only to find a smaller, separate dock full of boats. So we went there, negotiated a fair price in less than 5 minutes, confirmed the good and consistent health of the boat lift, and set out to see Mexico's Island of the Dolls. Wasn't that hard? With that cheeky backstory in our minds, we set out through the World Heritage Canals of Xochimilco. The first 40 minutes or so are set against the typical fiesta background of the popular Mexican destination. Families and group of friends, food, live music, and kitschy museums. Most people opt to simply enjoy the canals rather than push on the island of the dolls, and the fiesta atmosphere reflects Xochimilco's reputation for being a fun place to spend a leisurely afternoon. And then things change.
So, how was the ride in the canals, and was there anything that was creepy or something?
The canals of Xochimilco are ancient, a throwback to the pre-Hispanic Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, excuse my accent, which thrived between the 14th and 16th centuries as capital of the Mexican Empire, if I'm sure of the sources I got. So the canals were a part of the city's transportation network, but after more than 6 centuries of use and modern era neglected that includes over the use of water, rust sewage and puts an invasive species, they're in rough shape, so the ride was pretty rough. And that comes abundantly clear once you pass the boat lift and enter a separate section of the canals that is a world of way from the initial fiesta atmosphere. The first thing we noticed as the impossible to ignore sewage smell, so it was incredibly disgusting, unmistakably backed up by the visual of sewage spewing into the canal we were now floating through. As we left the sewers, the canals curved, and we found our boat fighting through overgrown weeds that have taken over the waters.
Were there any other tourists like you guys over there?
We were the only boat around, and all of a sudden the journey felt creepy and my imagination started running wild. It took us about 2 hours to get to the dolls, alternating between thick, overgrown greens and clear waters. We passed the orchards, where local family grow succulents and flowers, and a few boats with locals who were using the canals like the Aztec did, so as a transportation system, not leisure. For the most part, people took little interest in us as we passed, but a few times we were looked at what felt like contempt and suspicion, and again my imagination roamed wild. I'm surprised that people looked at us like that because there are a lot of people that are going to this island as tourists. But by the time we arrived to the island, our boatman was sweating from the work of getting us through the weeds, and our bladers were nearly bursting. We met the new island caretaker, Don Julian's son. Apparently, we were given a brief history of the dolls before being set free to explore our own. So, if you don't know, Don Julian is the man that basically he's the one that saw the ghost and the little girl and Anya most of these dolls.
And my final question is, was the island like what you expected to see over there?
Yes, it was exactly like I thought. It's as strange and creepy as you would think. When you walk around the place, you've got the feeling that the dolls are looking at you. We didn't stay very long on the island because we were really tired from the ride, but it was enough to creep us out. Once it was time to go, I was relieved that I would never see this place again. Even though it was really creepy, unfortunately we didn't see any ghosts because it was like the afternoon and you can't really encounter ghosts at daytime. But again, it was really creepy, and I'm more than happy that we didn't see more weird stuff than that because I was out of it.
Wow, what an amazing creepy story about the island of the dolls. I'd love to hear more of your stories, but we have a second guest that's here to help justify your story and maybe debunk these supernatural phenomena. I'm going to go get him. So while I do that, here's a short commercial break from our sponsor. Today's sponsor is Squarespace.com. Squarespace is the perfect place to create your own website and domain. Don't forget to use our code STP10 at checkout for 10% off on all your purchases. Now for our second guest, who's here to help prove or debunk Mr. Matthews' story. Let's welcome Dr. Abdou Asfour.
Hi guys! Thank you Ensley to invite me to this podcast. So I'm gonna introduce myself first of all and we will talk all about the real thing of Jeff stories. First of all, I was born in Pakistan in 1980s. I was always fascinated by strange things. Since I was 10 years old, I always liked to visit some strange and abandoned basement or house, and some of them I called some real paranormal activities. In 2003, I started to travel around the world to visit more spooky places. And then I started to go to Harvard University in science to learn more about this phenomenon. After that, I heard about the horrible islands of the dolls located in Mexico. I said to myself that I should go investigate this place and see if there's real paranormal activity in this location. So that's a brief story of why I came to this job and to answer some of your questions too.
So, when was the first time you went to the Island of the Dolls, Mr. Abudu?
Well, I came to this place like 1 year ago, so it's why I can remember a lot of things about this place. Before I went to this island, I did some research of why and how paranormal activities has been caught. This story of the island is very creepy, I'm not gonna lie, but it's true that they modify it to attract people and to attract professional, and it works.
So, after all you know about the Island of the Dolls, do you really think there is an actual paranormal activity happening here? Or they're just stories made up to attract tourists?
The thing is, sure, some of the stories are absolutely not true. Most of them is to attract people to make easy money. Like Jeff said, the boat tour is very expensive for nothing. But in the other hand, I will not say that other paranormal activities are not true. Other stuff like dolls following with their eyes or laugh by themselves is true, and trust me. I went to this place at night with permissions and this was not my favorite night. It was a horrible night. Just by making one steps in this island, you had the feeling that you've been watched or you're not comfortable in this place. I investigate some dolls and they are very creepy, but it seems that some of the dolls were just like already destroyed to make the island more and more horrible. Anyway, even if the island had hoax in it, it's still one of the strangest place I've ever been.
And you say that people will create stories about this place just to attract tourists to make money?
Most of them, yeah. If you didn't know, every haunted place has some fake stories to attract people, and because of that, they make a lot of money. So every time we heard haunted story about places that's supposed to be haunted, it is mostly recommended to take a look on the internet and see if it's true or not. But yeah, money can change people very easily, so when you heard a story, don't believe it too fast.
So, my last question for you is why did you want to know if the paranormal activities that were happening here were real?
Well, we can find a lot of place that's it's exactly the same theme. Like this island is dolls, and it was hard to find somewhere like this place, and I thought that it would be great and a great experience to live. After that, I heard the story, so I was way more excited to visit this place, and I was always scared of dolls, so I wanted to face my fear and go see this island.
Thank you, Mr. S4, for your scientific remarks. I'd like to say thank you to our listeners for having stayed all along, and also our two guests, Mr. Matthews and Dr. Abudu, for having taken part in the Strange Things podcast. As always, I have to remind you guys about our sponsor, Squarespace, an ideal place for all your domain names. Thank you, and let us know what paranormal activity you would like us to cover next.